today I wanted to try and make some Christmas ornaments, but like I want to go like 3D with it. Um, I I think if you do a search on Etsy for something like 3D snowflake ornament, you will find a lot of these things um, that are like constructed with like, two layers that are like interlocked together. So I think there are like cool ways of doing that in Cuttle. Um, so I wanna I wanna try and do something like that. Um, so I think that there is gonna be a little bit of setup at the beginning, but like stay with me because I think it has a good payoff. Um, so yeah, I was looking for inspiration on Etsy. I see that people make this kind of stuff. So they usually have like a hanging hole on top. Let's look at this one. This one is not strictly a snowflake; it's more like a star. So there are like options, different things you can do. I mean, this is more like a star with sort of snowflakes inside of it. Um, this one is more snowflakey, but like still like um, I find this one interesting because it's a lot of them are like hollow in the middle. Um, so anyway, like I want to try and recreate these, but like not stick to stars only. I want to like be able to design any other kind of shape. So so I think the basic idea is something like this. I think in general, you want to sort of create your own construction toy, sort of. So I think if you have like, two flat pieces, I think the easiest way to like connect them, or one of the easy ways to connect them is to like, cut it in the middle, or do like a slit, um, and then kind of connect those two slits together. So one like goes into the other, something like these. Let's see, and like you push it in. So it's not perfect because my cut is like, it's not as thick as it should be. But I think that is like the basic idea of what I want to do with these. So so yeah, let's get started. So I have a blank project right here. Um, I'm gonna just add a name real quick. So snowflake. No, actually, let's call it slot ornament. Slotted ornament. Um, and so I think I wanna. I'm going to try and replicate the same thing I just did, but I'm going to use a circle instead. So I'm going to drag a circle from the left. I'm going to place it right on the center of the canvas. And I want it to be about 2 inches just for my test. So I'm going to scale it to 2 inches. And so the basic idea is that I want to have a shape, and then I want to apply that. I want to cut that slot out of the shape. So I'm going to just rename this component shape. And there might be two copies of that shape because one of the copies is going to have the hole on the top, and the other one is not going to. So I want to be thinking about that as I go. And I think as I go also, I'm going to be referring to the height of the shape because I might want to change the height in the future. So I'm actually just going to straight up start with a parameter. I'm going to call it height. So I'm going to click the plus over here, create a new parameter. I'm going to rename it height. And because I'm starting with 2 inches, I'm just going to type 2 inches. And so now I want to sort of connect, sort of like plug in this height parameter I just created into the scale of the shape. And so in order to do that, I simply go here to the scale and then just type height. And so just to confirm that it's working, if if this is 2.00, let's say if I change that, that should change the scale of my circle. So that's just something so I can keep on referring to it. And now let's create like a slot in the middle. So a slot is just a simple rectangle. So I'm gonna drag a rectangle. If I place it on the center, and so I know that slot needs to be as thick as the material that I'm using. So I think that's another parameter I'm just going to throw out there right away, because I want the scale, this kind of horizontal scale of that slot to be my material thickness. So I'm going to do the same. I'm going to create a new parameter. I'm going to call it material thickness. And just to start, let's do something like 0.05. And I'm going to do kind of like the same I just did before, which is I want to sort of plug in this material thickness kind of gets plugged in into the scale of that slot. And so I'm just going to click here and then type material thickness. So now, just to confirm things are working, if I scale this up, then the scale of that rectangle is changing. And the placement of that rectangle, I think when you're slotting these things together, like you want to go kind of like halfway, halfway up and halfway down. So I'm going to move the slot like down here. But check this out. Something happens if I try to change the scale of that slot right here. It all expands based on the center point of the rectangle, but we can change that behavior. We can actually move the origin. And so if I press Control or Command, depends if you're a Mac or I can like grab the transform center. And so if I move it like all the way up to the top midpoint of the rectangle, now if I change the scale, like here, you can see how it like the origin point stays put, and then the rectangle moves out from that. So so it does something like that, and that's kind of like basically what I want. I'm gonna do perhaps a little bit more organization, but like I wanted to prototype my shapes using this chipboard, which is like a type of cardboard that is like really inexpensive. And so, I can measure the thickness. I have my calipers here, so I'm gonna measure the thickness. See if I can make it show up on camera. So something like that, I think works well. That's in inches. So I'm actually gonna just apply that material thickness. So I said 0.052. That works for me. All right, so because I'm going to be reusing the slot, I'm going to make that into a separate component. A way to make a shape into a separate component is also you can right-click on the shape, and then there's an option that says extract as component. That's like analogous to doing the extract parameter. And so that created that component over here, which is simply the slot. So I'm going to rename it slot. And so now I'm just going to like prepare it so I can like send it to the laser cutter. So let's create another component. So I don't want that slot like right on my shape because I want the shape to be at the place where I design things. So I'm actually going to give this a fill. So I'm actually going to create another component. I'm going to call it the top. And so the top section of my assembly is going to be the shape. There it is. And the slot. Oh, perhaps something I didn't do. I could do these. Yeah, let's leave it like this for now. And then I want to kind of subtract that shape from that. And perhaps the easy way to manage that is using flatten. So I'm going to make my shape white, meaning I'm going to give it a fill. And so I'm going to make it white. And so I can kind of visually see that I want to subtract that from the main shape. And I'm going to make another component that is going to be the bottom. For now, they're the same, but let's go with me. So the bottom is going to also have the slot. So I'm going to grab that slot, but I wanted to rotate it completely so it's on top. So I can actually transform it by holding like this. If I hold the shift key, it's going to rotate in kind of even increments. So I wanted 180. And so that's the bottom because that's going to assembly at the bottom. And then I'm going to create a new component and I'm going to call that the cut. Oh, but I actually need to apply the transformation. So here, I'm going to select these and I'm going to use flatten in this case. So if I check the stroke result, this is what I wanted. So I got the cut out of my shape. and I'm gonna grab the bottom. And in this case, I could use flatten, it works. I could also use the subtraction Boolean, which is difference. So if I use difference, the result is the same. I'm gonna undo it, but I'm gonna do flatten just because it's kind of visually. And there we go. And so the cut, my cut is always gonna have the top section and then the bottom section. And so with these, I actually went ahead and sent these to, I can send these to the laser cutter. I can like, either copy and paste it or go to file and export SVG. And so let's see how that turned out. And remember that I used the material thickness here that is 0.052, which is what I measured. And so I cut these two circles. Here they are, exactly with those dimensions. And so now I can check for the fit. So if I go in kind of like these, you can see that the fit is relatively, it's very easy, it's precise, but it moves fairly easy. And if I put the two of them together, it goes inside kind of nicely, it kind of holds, but like you can see that there is a little wiggle and it doesn't kind of easily stay together. And the reason for that is that the laser cut precisely as I told it, but like at the end, the cut, this cut is not exactly the thickness of the material as I measured it because of the laser burning a little bit more. So we kind of want to compensate for that additional amount that gets burnt. So that's what I'm going to do. And, often that is called the Kerf, but let's see how I would implement it. So I want it to be controllable and kind of like familiar to people that do boxes and things like that. So I'm going to add another parameter. I'm going to call it the Kerf. And I happen to know that on my laser, or the default that we use for a lot of these things is 0.07 inches. And so I want to go to my slot component over here. And here we go. And so remember that this one is sized, the thickness of it is material thickness. And I want to subtract it by the Kerf. So I'm going to go here and say subtract minus the Kerf. This is the same as me typing 0.07 here. And just to check that it's working, you see that if I subtract that, the thickness of the square changes. But it's easier for me to type Kerf. So I actually need to type it correctly. So I can actually just change it from here. So I don't have to have that selected if I change it from here. See, so if I make the Kerf bigger, the slot gets smaller because that is weird. It's being subtracted. But the idea here is that like we sort of know that the amount of that the laser burns is something like that. So we make the slot smaller by that amount, so it kind of fits a little better. But because I did all my setup here, I can actually come in and I can just change my shape. Actually, for example, I'm just gonna hide it. I'm gonna hide the circle, so it disappears. I mean, it's still there, but it doesn't affect the cut. I'm gonna grab a rectangle. I'm gonna place it on my shapes. Because I use flatten all around, I need to give it a fill, specifically a gray fill in this case. And then the scale, I could just, I could do it in any way, but I remember I've been using height for the scale, so I'm just gonna use height. So that immediately makes it 2. The cool thing about having done all this setup is that now if I go and look at the top and the bottom and the cut, that is exactly that rectangle that I created. And the thickness of the slot should be a little bit smaller. So let's see what that looks like. So here's my rectangle. This is one part of the rectangle, and here's the other. And so check this out. Now the slot it's a little bit tighter. So I actually have to, it kind of stays in place. And that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted like a little bit tighter so it holds. And so let's test it now, the two of them together. So I think I got a nice fit. Like it's a little bit less wiggly. So you can see how it's like fairly firm and it kind of stays in place. So I think with this setup, now that I did the rectangle or the square, and the circle, I think we can go ahead and try something else, something that starts becoming a bit more decorative. So coming back here, remember that at the top, I wanted to do like a little circle with a hole. And so I think this is the moment to add that. So that's only gonna go at the top. So I'm gonna select here my my component that I call the top. I'm not sure top makes sense, but let's go with it. Let's change the shape to start with. So I'm gonna go to my shape and make the rectangle, hide the rectangle by making it not visible. And I wanna kind of approach that snowflake idea. So I'm gonna grab a polygon, make it 6 sides, that makes it a hexagon. And I'm gonna scale it up by height, which is what I selected before. So that makes the total height of the shape 2 inches. Let's give it a fill, and let's go check if the things are working. So the top looks good, the bottom looks good, and the cut looks good. So let's modify that top. So the thing I want to do is let's get rid of the flatten so we can visualize things. I'm just gonna delete that. So what I want to do is add a hole at the top. So that's just a circle. So if I place it right in the middle, I can start looking at it. So let's start with like a 1/4 inch hole, something like this, 0.25. And I want that hole to go all the way to the top. So one way to do it is that because I've been using this height parameter, I can use that to move it. But one thing I want to do is that if I move it the origin based on the center of the circle, it's going to do something like that. So it's going to be like cutting into my shape. I actually want it to be like something like this. So it's just kind of like touching the corner. So I can do that same thing I did before, which is I can change the origin of the circle. So I can hold Command or Control, and I get this little origin transform center, and I'm going to move it down to the bottom of the circle. So now that makes it the reference. So if I place it like at the center of the canvas, you can see that the position is, actually I don't want to change that one. The position here on the y-axis is the one that changes. So I can make that position the half of the height, because the total height is from here to here. So half of it should be, I don't need to calculate it, I can just type it. I can write height divided by 2. Notice how big it goes if I don't divide it by 2. It just kind of goes all the way up. So anyway, we need to divide it by 2, so it's half of the height. And then, is this too big? Maybe it's like 0.2. And now we want to give it a stroke, or change the stroke. So let's uncheck this hairline. And so let's make that like 1/8 of an inch, so 0.125. But again, like usually when we do this whole trick is we move the stroke to the outside of the circle. So the alignment is outer. That way the inside of the circle is always the dimension I enter for the circle, or this scale right here. And then the outside of the circle is the one that creates kind of like that thickness that we want to be able to hang it. And then we want to change the color to gray, because gray is what's going to join it together. So that's only at the top. And are things working? I guess if I change the height, that should change with it. And then now I just need to join it all together. So I'm going to select all of it, go to modify, and apply that flatten. Remember, I deleted it before. So now if I go look at the bottom, that looks good. And I get the top, which has my hanging hole, and the bottom, which has nothing. And then on the flatten here, we usually do stroke result, so it's like it doesn't confuse my laser initially. So let's see how that one looks. So I cut that hexagon right there. So I have the hole at the top, and I can join it. I didn't change anything related to the slot, so it has basically the same fit. And this is what I mean by how I did that circle like right on top, because I didn't want the point of the hexagon to be interrupting my hole, so I could like hang it. So far this isn't looking terribly ornamental, but now that we have all the setup, I think we can go ahead and do something something more ornamental, because now that I have everything set up, I can just simply go and design or change things with my shape. So I'm gonna go back to my shape. I'm gonna hide that polygon, the hexagon, and let's try something just kind of like pre-made. So one thing I can do is my circle, the one I used before, that one is the one that changes with the height. I can use this as a reference, and so to do that, I can click here to make it into a guide. A guide is just something that you use to guide your design, but it doesn't translate into the final cut. So I was thinking, one simple one that we can do that is kind of pre-made is a star. So if I grab a star, I place it here. I can make it 2 inches, so it matches my thing. I could do, I could either make it 2 inches or simply type height. And I like a slightly fat star, so I'm gonna change the inner radius, so it's like 60%. You can see how that makes it a little bit more chunky. And once again, we need to make it gray, so it matches all the other operations. So let's look at it. So is the top has the slot, the bottom has the slot, and the cut is looking good. And let's see what it looks like when I cut it. So that was like that. This is what I was saying, that like it's a lot of setup at the beginning, but once it's set up, then I can like kind of change the shape and like start playing around, because so here's the star as I cut it. So that was just like a little pre-made star. So it slots nicely, and there we go. We have the little. I think comparing it to the inspiration that I was showing you on Etsy, this one doesn't have enough decorations inside, but like it's getting there. It's a star. So that was using a pre-made shape, but like I think we can like try. We could try and build something different. And notice that I'm simply hiding all this I'm creating, because then I can always come back and change, and make them visible, and then that kind of gives me the project. Let's try something more constructed. I think like a little Christmas tree. I'm gonna change my guide from a circle to the rectangle. So I'm just gonna make the rectangle visible and make it into a guide. I want to do like a lazy Christmas tree. So I'm gonna do like a triangle. Search for a triangle here. Place it here on the center. Then let's make it a little bit taller. So that would be, let's see, well, looks good. Christmas tree. So there's like a tall triangle. And then a slightly wider triangle. So what did I do before? 1.5. And then I just want to place it so it's within my bounds. And then let's give it like a trunk. So let's make this, apply the fill. So it's gray. And the trunk is just a simple rectangle. I'm just going to grab a rectangle, make it about 1/2 inch. A little bit less than 1/2 inch. And just place it at the very bottom, and also give it a gray fill. So I don't have to do any operation here, because the flatten gets applied elsewhere, in the component at the bottom and at the top. So what I like about this setup is that I can like just sort of concentrate on making my shape here, and then sort of everything else gets kind of taken care of as I go. So I think this looks good. So I actually went ahead and tried to cut it. So let's see. my little Christmas tree. Oh, I have too many things on my desk. Here we go. So here it is. Once again, that like you can see how the placing that circle at the very top makes it so when I slot these together, that point just matches nicely there at the top. So it's a lazy Christmas tree. I'll I'll admit it. But I think to end, let's like attempt a snowflake. I think that's like the fun kind of impressive one that would be nice to do. And so I only need to go back to the shape. I could actually just group these two together. I'm gonna right click, hit group, and just hide it. So I'm not like getting rid of my shapes. But let's go back to the polygon and make that into a guide. So I can sort of sketch out my snowflake. So I think the snowflake starts with like a central arm. So I'm just gonna use the pen tool and do a central arm right there. It's gonna be a simple line. And then I'm gonna do like a little branch that goes off the midpoint and just kind of whatever over here. And so here's the trick. So I'm gonna make these, I'm gonna change the hairline to give it some width, and same with this one. And the thing I wanna do is I want this branch to be reflected on the other side. So I'm gonna go to modify and apply this mirror repeat that creates like a mirror copy of it on the other side. And the beauty of that mirror copy is that if I double click into it, I can move it around, and you can see how the one on the left just controls the one on the right. So that's good. And now that that one is mirrored, I just need to repeat all of them around the shape. So I need to select the two of them, the center and the center and the two sides, and I'm gonna apply another modifier on top that's called the rotational repeat. So as a default, that rotational repeat repeats it 6 times, but like, let's see if we can change it. We can make it 3 or 4 or even more. It gets kind of too complicated. So I'm gonna stick, ooh, wow, 7 looks cool. I'm gonna stick with 6. And very importantly, we wanna make it again gray because that's what we've been using. So I'm just gonna select everything. Maybe I'll group it. And then I'm gonna give all that group a hairline, make it gray for sure. And then the width, I think I want it a little bit thicker. Because if I go and look at what happens after it gets treated, you can see that the slot cuts through it, but then it leaves me a little bit of space here. Okay, so another thing I'm noticing is that the way I made it now, my top branch just kind of interrupts the whole. So I think I'm gonna correct that. So I'm gonna go back to my shape, and I'm gonna double click and double click again until I can edit that path. So I can move these anchor a little bit down. That way it gives me a little space there. And I can do the same with this one actually. I can just kind of make it fall inside of the hexagon. And then I can double click on the canvas outside of it to get out of it. And I think even thicker, I think like 0.2. Yeah, 0.2, like it's really thick. These might be way too close, so I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna double click until I can edit that path and then move it around. Very satisfyingly, all of them move around. And at this point, I can see if the top is working a little better. The bottom is working. One final adjustment. Move it down a tiny bit. So, oh, I see what's, yeah, okay. So I went ahead and sent this one to the laser cutter, and I cut myself a cute little snowflake. So here it is, just to show you. And it assembles nicely. I think if I were to sell these or something, I would probably I don't know. Depends on how I feel about the assembly. I might want to glue it, but it works. It works all right. I think it's a fun kind of way of getting like a 3D looking product. The last thing I did is I actually wanted to test it on wood because I've been using just chipboard to prototype because it's like kind of cheap and recyclable. But something I did, I went here when I was working on my Snowflake, I made it like 2.5. So this just changes the guide. I didn't spend a ton of 2.5. I didn't spend a ton of time trying to like add parameters to my Snowflake because I can come back here and then move it until it kind of matches something. But hopefully this gives you some ideas to like kind of figure out your Snowflake. And because the hole also drives the height, that worked out fine. And then most importantly, I changed the material thickness to match this wood I had. So I did that, and then the slot adjusted. Maybe that slot actually should be driven by something. So I just kind of hard coded that. I'm just gonna make it height. It just makes it really long, which is fine, but at least it punches all the way through. You can see that. So it doesn't affect the top because that's facing down, but the bottom, it's fine. So yeah, I went ahead and cut down one. So I wanted to show you that just to end up the stream. So that one is out of wood, and it was using exactly the same setup. So wood is quite different from chipboard, but by adding the material thickness, it just made it workable. So that is my little wooden Snowflake. I love playing with like construction toys and stuff like this. So this feels like building my own construction toy. I will be publishing this template with the intention of for you to go and like play around with it and like maybe make other designs, because now that you know that all the thing that you have to change is the shape here, and you understand how it works, you can do all sorts of wacky things by moving things around. And hopefully you can make some kind of assembly 3D ornaments. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Okay, bye.